LindaYouTube. I live in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I'm a printmaker. Well, I was an art major in college. I was always interested in art, so I kind of always thought I would be an artist even when I was young, but of course being Asian, you're kind of pushed into the sciences, so I was also a math major. So I entered college as a math major thinking I would maybe do a double major, art and math. But my sophomore year I decided, I really can live without the math, but I couldn't live without the art. So I really focused in on being an art major on my junior year in college. When I was in college, I focused on watercolor and collage. And after that, I did some serigraph prints. And now I'm doing monotypes and collage. And I can see that all of those past experiences have kind of helped to mold what I'm doing now. So you'll see elements of my watercolor, the technique, and of the serigraph techniques in my monotypes now. Okay, the first thing is I do a lot of sketching when I take walks in the neighborhood or places I go. I either do some sketching or I take photos of nature, and usually my themes are nature inspired, nature related. So I like branches and leaves and trees. And when I see something that's kind of interesting, I take a picture, and then I come back to my studio and I draw the sketches onto large sheets of tracing paper. I usually start with colors in mind, and maybe the orientation of the print, if it's going to be horizontal or vertical. And I roll ink onto just a plain sheet of plexiglass. And I mixed my colors, and I use rollers and brayers to put ink onto the plexiglass. Meanwhile, I've been soaking printmaking paper in a bath, because the paper has to be, it often has sizing on it, and the water will take some of the sizing off so that it'll absorb the ink better. And I use BFK Reeves printmaking paper normally. There's several different papers I can use, but I like the BFK. It's a little firmer. It's archival, but it holds up. So that paper has to be blotted, and then I place that onto the plexiglass that's now got ink on it, and then I run it through my etching press. So that's sort of like my background color. And after I run it through, then sometimes I do a second layer of color. Sometimes I put texture on that, like I either splatter water on it or I put brush marks on it, so that there's something interesting going on. It's just not a solid color. So that's the first day of printing. And I usually do several in that day, because I've mixed up the color. So I usually do maybe up to 8 prints of background prints the first day. And those have to dry completely. So I usually put them out, and I have a drying area, and those dry for maybe 2 days. Then on the second day of printing, I choose the tracing paper drawing that I want to print. I put that on my table, and I put a plain sheet of plexiglass now on top of that, and I draw the image, I trace it with a very thin bead of oil. I have an applicator bottle that has a tip, a very fine tip, and I draw with oil. I use a brush to sort of, spread it out, but it has to be very, very thin. So I've mixed up my ink, and I've drawn the image with the oil, and then I roll the ink onto a large roller that I have. I have actually several size rollers. I roll the ink onto that, and then I roll the ink over my drawing. And because I use water-based ink, the oil acts like a resist. And so wherever I've drawn the image, the oil, the ink doesn't go where the drawing is, so it's open. And then what I do is, after I roll it, I pick up the roller and I kind of shift it a little bit, and I roll it again. And what the interesting thing that happens is that image has made an impression onto my roller. And so when I roll it a second time, it actually prints like a ghost behind the image. So it's kind of an accident that I saw happen one time, and I said, oh, that is really cool. And because also Depending on the size of the roller, the image will repeat depending on the circumference of the rollers. And then I get the paper from the previous day that had the background color. I put that over the plate, and then I run that through the press. And then that's basically what it is. Sometimes it looks great the way it is. Sometimes I think it needs a little more, and that's the artist in me. I think, okay, it could use a little more something, and so I sometimes cut off a piece, and I do yet another layer of, maybe if I've done the light color the second time, then I'll print another dark color, and I'll get something with a similar drawing, and I border that, and those are collaged pieces onto the original piece. So the process from start to finish usually takes about 2 weeks, but usually at the end of the 2 weeks I've finished several prints. I have a lot of Japanese influence. A lot has to do with the fact that my mother is from Japan, and a lot of things that I grew up, like all my life lessons, I say, were metaphors with using nature as an example. For example, she'd say, oh, you should be like the bamboo that sways with the wind and not bend, that bends and not breaks. So you should be saying that, you have to be flexible. She also said, the grass is often trodden upon, but it still comes back, and things like that she would use to encourage me or to give me lessons in life. And that's why I picked those things as my subject matter, because I find those things to be very inspiring. And when I walk, I look for things like that. Maybe the branch that's not perfect, but it bent around something else so that it gets more light, or had to go past an obstacle in some way. So I find those things to be very inspirational for me, and also very comforting, because those were the kinds of things my mother would tell me. The other very strong influence is my father, who was a judo instructor. And unfortunately, he had 2 daughters, but he had us starting judo at a young age. He really felt that it was a character building thing, and he also used it as, again, as lessons, as in character. And he said, how if you practice hard and if you're disciplined, that those things will come out in your movements. And so when I draw, I think about that, and I think about doing the perfect line with just one movement, and if sometimes it comes out wiggly or not right, I go, okay, that's because I'm not centered today, and I need to, be more focused. And I would think about my stance, and I think about my movements, and I feel like those things then will come out in the drawing. And it's an influence of my father and my mother, and because there's a lot of Japanese tradition and some Zen teachings in there. I think that comes out, even though I grew up in Los Angeles, and all my art training has been Western, but there's something about all of those teachings that does come out in my art. And I think that kind of makes my work a little bit unique. I can tell when I take a long break, like during the holidays, or when I'm not working, and then I am just very antsy to get back in. It's sort of something I have to do. It's almost like that you don't pick art, but that art picks you. And I really feel that was something I was meant to do. And I'm the happiest when I'm in here.